professing love for the world and ranting against the world. That's the video for today. All right, well, we'll start this with what I'm against. And remember, all of this is in love. The whole intent of the video is in love. So let's go and start with what I'm against. All right. I got my notes here, so I could do this absolutely perfect, and it will likely come out anything other than absolutely perfect. So we could start with the classic, and this is probably played, the whole women being bitches, women being bitches, women being bitches. Let's get a little deeper into that. You say that it love enough, whether in song or whether, when you're chilling with, your friends and all that. That's something that sinks in, it sinks into the mind, and on some level you end up believing that, and on some level you end up attracting that into your life, as a male. So it doesn't really benefit you either, at least in terms of your relationships. Because if you do say something enough, if you say it with enough passion, whether in your art or whether in your day-to-day, on some level that's going to become your reality. And plus, at the end of the day, it sets up this environment of, whether we want to call it exploitation or objectification, of looking at women as a whole in a very shallow way and limiting your potential in terms of what you can have with a woman, what you can build with a woman, the right kind of woman. I think so much of that can simply start with how you describe women in your art. So obviously I'm talking about music in large part, but this extends beyond music. And hey, I'm bringing all this up. A lot of that music I listen to, I still do listen to it. So understand, I'm going to bring up a good chunk of things that I'm against, but in many ways I also serve as a contradiction, because I listen to these things, because within this music, often, because so often it's music, that there's so much brilliance. There's so much brilliant rap and hip hop music out there, but there are still these flaws within it. And I think I think humanity as a whole, I think the rap game as a whole can move hip hop to the next level and be beyond using those type of descriptions so often. Also, what I'm against is overindulgence in drugs and alcohol. Personally, I don't drink, but I don't have a personal problem with people drinking or with people using drugs. Do what you want, at least in terms of drugs anyway. Things like weed, I think weed is essentially harmless, as far as it's not anything close to how cocaine will affect you, how heroin will affect you, how meth can affect you. You're not going to smoke weed and begin scratching your skin up, and you're not going to lose all your teeth because of it. You're probably not going to turn ultra violent off smoking some weed. You eat some snacks, you go to sleep. I'm saying this even though weed has never really done much for me, and I haven't smoked it in probably over a decade at this point, but definitely a proponent of it. I do believe it should be legalized, but overindulgence in it, I'm against, because I think you smoke too much of it or do it all the time. I do think it limits your ability to be creative, your ability to be productive, your ability to look for other sources, healthier, stronger, more powerful, more infinite. That's a hint right there. That's a hint right there. More infinite sources of happiness and peace and calmness, which you want the weed for in the first place. So that's a take on weed right there. But at the same time, legalize it, legalize it, legalize it. Tax and regulate. Let's get some money. Let's get paid. All right. I'm against false narratives of happiness. Now, this goes broad. False narratives of happiness. What could I possibly mean by false narratives of happiness? How about almost everything that society is? All right? You think the relationship's going to make you happy? Wrong. You think the money's going to make you happy? Wrong. The cars? Wrong. The fame? Wrong. The clothes? Wrong. The liquor? Wrong. Drugs? Wrong. the family wrong. You think being the best at something, better than everybody, and recognized as such is going to make you happy. Wrong. That's not going to do it either. Obviously, happiness goes so much deeper. I think I think in movies, I think in pop culture, I think in music, I think in rap music in particular, there's this false narrative of happiness. And this isn't necessarily conveyed strictly in the words themselves, but also the imagery. You're going to get videos out there that show, the fellas at the clubs with money, throwing a bunch of cash, women smiling and dancing, and people drinking weed. Dude, it's a gray, dull, tedious reality. That's what it is. That's what it would become for anyone who's involved in that. If that's just your day-to-day or even your weekly, that's going to become old real quick. It perpetuates this idea that sex, money, tons of cash, and women, with a fat ass, tits, nice smile, pretty face, that's going to bring you happiness. Not even close. Because here's the great illusion, right? Here's how you can see through the great illusion. When you are looking at a woman or men, or women, when you're looking at a man, start to ask yourself, what is their mind like? What is their mind like? And approach according to that. There's things you can do in terms of asking certain questions, sparking certain types of conversation, or just get a certain sense of their energy. That's how you'll tell who can actually have a more of an influence on your happiness, even though still, as I said, a relationship won't bring you happiness, but it can help direct you in the right direction. That's redundant. It can help move you in the right direction in terms of your happiness. Materialism, things such as, big houses, nice cars, jewelry. I mean, I think, you know what? I think in the rap game, I think, and I might be deluded here, but I think the jewelry thing's becoming played. I think in hip hop itself, flashing, these chains and all this stuff is becoming played. I think I'm noticing a lot of the biggest rappers don't seem to be just flaunting chains and, wearing a super expensive 100,000, 200,000, 500K jewelry on their necks and their wrist and all that. So it does seem like that is becoming less of that's no longer accepted as broadly or not looked at as cool. I think because we've obviously had murders behind people getting robbed for jewels, and plus it's the principle everyone should learn to live by. Kendrick Lamar preaches this, and you can see this in just what he wears, his clothing. And he is multi-millionaire, but he doesn't wear jewelry, all on his he doesn't wear jewelry on on his neck and wrist and all that stuff. He doesn't flaunt jewelry. He said a great line in this Jadina song, I don't have the jewelry on me, I have it in me. And that's the way I think hip-hop could best be directed. If all hip-hop artists were thinking, I don't have the jewelry on me, I have it in me, and they really begin to embrace that concept, that could have huge influence over more of the negative, unhelpful, bland, played, childish, juvenile, materialistic, shallow, selfish, overly commercialized rap music that's out there. I think you switch it up just by that concept alone. I don't have the jewelry on me, I have it in me. Complaining, but more in the larger sense of the word. We could get into the basics of complaining. What is complaining? I mean, obviously we all know what complaining is. Complaining about not being able to pay your rent, complaining about not being able to pay your car note, complaining about some woman you're with or some dude you're with or the friends you're with or your children or your job or your family situation or your upbringing or your city or your state or the country or the globe. I think there's political channels out there, both on the left and the right. They do a lot of complaining, but it's not aimed in the most productive way. I think the right will relentlessly demonize the left, and the left relentlessly demonizes the right, or people that are on the left but are not on the left in the way that the left would like. The left, I think, is definitely a culprit of being overly critical and overly negative and overly pessimistic, even though I would not say they do it, they're not as bad as the right with this. But what's funny is, and I might be tripping on this point, it does seem like when it comes to the right is more willing to embrace certain people who, whether they're in the center or maybe they're kind of on the left, even though a lot of these people are not, and they're fakes. So let me get real. There's a fake left out there, a fake left contingent. It exists. But if you have certain people that are actually on the left, actually Democrats, but they do say certain things here and there that are more aligned with the right or a little more conservative, the right is more willing to embrace them, whereas the left, segments of the left will shit all over them for not falling perfectly in line. That is so annoying. Man, that's the most annoying thing. Because, stop trying to fit everyone in a box. I mean, it's the same, black people do this too. If you try to, believe if a person's black, they need to be this way, they need to be that. They either need to be Democrat or they need to be, in the rap, or they need to, understand the culture or dress this way. I don't think it gets perpetuated the same way, though, in terms of overall black culture, because of social media, it's allowed people, including black people, to see different kinds of black people within their own country. They're not limited to just the black people that grew up in the hood, or limited to the black people who are more familiar with the street life and not as familiar with more of a book learning, academic type of life. It's exposed people and black people and the nation as a whole to the fact that black people are not a monolith. So I think that's a beautiful thing. But for the aspects of that cliched, played thinking of black people being one kind of way, for what does exist of that still, I'm definitely not for that. All right, let's jump off of the stuff I'm against, but that's just to give that kind of sense. I could go on obviously forever in terms of stuff I'm against. And ironically, I have a very deep understanding that it's not helpful for anyone to just go on about what they're against, but I'm doing that to set up what I'm for, to speak about potential. So let's speak about potential, shall we? All right. So what am I for? What am I for? What is UMI for? Since he wants to talk about the stuff he's against. First and foremost, love, which is connected to consciousness, higher consciousness, and understanding, appreciation, and compassion. Imagine a world where you routinely could go out for a cup of coffee and someone else buys it for you in the coffee shop, because there's so many people out there who just want to give. Or you routinely go out for a cup of coffee and you routinely buy someone else's coffee because you have the constant need to give. And this obviously starts with what you create within yourself, how you develop yourself to become a more giving being, which comes from raising your consciousness. Imagine a world where none of us are enthusiastic, or whether on the right or the left, we are very much against war and pro-peace, because we feel the past plight and the potential future plight of all human beings that would be engaged in that war, whether just civilians in the countries where these wars are occurring, or our own country, in terms of how our economy is affected by the billions upon billions and hundreds of billions and even up to trillions spent on war. Imagine that. Imagine that money that goes to war being spent on schooling, being spent on the roads, being spent on further expansion of the internet, access to internet, not even just in terms of our own country, but other countries. Imagine that money being spent on giving every single human being on the planet Earth a cell phone with high-speed data, unlimited access. Imagine how engaged, we'd be able to be. There are still large swaths of this globe where people do not have cell phones. And I think one of the greatest solutions to the problems humanity faces is simply giving people access to the internet. Imagine a country where you have billions and billions more spent on inducing creativity within its individuals and perpetuating the idea of creativity, of accessing infinite creativity. Imagine if that was the goal. How do we make every one of the 300 million plus, what is it like, I don't know, it's 330, 40, 50 million people, whatever the population in the US is. Imagine if that was the standard. Infinite creativity. How do we give everyone access to infinite creativity? Where does that start? How does consciousness work play into that? How do the teachings of infinite love play into that? How can psychedelics play into that? I don't do psychedelics, but there is potential for that. What if, and remember, this is what I'm for. Imagine a world where we emphasize the connection to infinite intelligence. In school, how do we give all these kids access to infinite intelligence? How do we tell them how to get engaged with infinite intelligence? In terms of infinite peace, tranquility, infinite happiness. Visualize a world where the central idea is connecting everyone to this concept of infinite happiness. We don't do it based on dogma, based on orthodoxy, based on what's normal or convention, but we base it more on the opening and the expansion of the minds, of radical open-mindedness to connect everyone to this idea of infinite happiness, of being able to experience infinite beauty. Imagine in school, in pre-K, in elementary, in middle school, and high school, if one of the courses taught was simply titled Infinite Beauty. Imagine infinite beauty. Could you imagine a class where the central idea is to teach kids how to connect and be able to see infinite beauty, be able to see how they themselves are connected to infinite beauty, how infinite beauty is everything that is around them, and how that would connect to infinite love, infinite intelligence, infinite creativity, infinite peace. Could you imagine what a world like that would look like? So you connect these concepts and it changes hip hop. It changes how we treat our women, how women treat men, how we treat our children. It changes how we look at things shallow, such as materialism, and this over-perpetuation of money and shallow material things, and women who are very beautiful on the inside but not developed on the inside being the end-all be-all to your happiness, and men who are very good-looking on the outside or seem to be balling and be paid and be connected and have status, how these types of men may have created what seems on the surface like a quality lifestyle, but like certain women who are look good on the outside but not so good on the inside, are not very developed. These men are not very developed on the inside. Instead of having so much focus on that. Imagine if you develop the minds of this world where everyone automatically looks towards a person's inner being to be able to intuit its own potential connectivity with their inner being. Imagine if that was the go-to. We feel, we intuit for energy for the highest level of connectedness when it comes to love, when it comes to appreciating other people, when it comes to bringing people up in society, what we preach about, what we find is most important. Imagine what that would do in terms of war, how that would make people see people more as themselves and just by default lose this taste and this thirst for war and the military-industrial complex. Just imagine that. What I'm for is higher consciousness, higher love, infinite consciousness, infinite peace. There is a level of, in short, you can, no exaggeration, create heaven within. And I get a little bit closer every single day I continue to do this consciousness work. We as a society can create heaven on earth, but first you create heaven within. You can feel fully, wholly heaven within yourself. It is possible if you get your mind outside of orthodoxy and it's locked in ways and the one way, conventional, dogmatic way of looking at things, and expand yourself. Be willing to listen to other perspectives. Be willing to go inside with time alone with yourself. In time, if you do this consistently enough, you're going to notice this beautiful internal state which you've created within yourself expressed in your external world, in the physical sight you see, in the people you encounter, even to the extent of what you're seeing on TV, what you're seeing on YouTube, what you're reading. Well, you might have to put a little more effort in terms of searching out certain news, because news hardcore pushes a very, very negative narrative. But just imagine if we were for infinite love at all cost, infinite truth, or I should say, let me change that, absolute truth, which is connected to all these things: infinite love, infinite tranquility, infinite creativity, infinite beauty. Imagine if the end-all be-all of humanity was getting everyone connected to absolute truth and understanding that it all starts within, it all starts with the individual. Everyone has to make a deal with themselves to go at it solo dolo to create this ideal state within. And in time, for every single man, woman, and child in society, we will have created the ideal circumstances without in the external world. And with that, I am done. You am I out.